night and day, black and white, good and evil, right and wrong. The human mind works in binaries, in twos, this side and that side, my team and your team. The humorist Ring Lardner once said that there are two kinds of people: people who divide people into two kinds and people who don't. And this working of binaries is something that we all do. And so when I'm talking about the Jewish future, which is my subject this morning, and was the other night, Thursday night, part of it is a temptation to speak about it in these kinds of dichotomous terms. That is, the future will be great, it'll be terrible. The future looks bright, it looks dim. We're going to be fine, we're not going to be fine. When in fact, part of what I was talking about on Thursday night is, first of all, that nobody can accurately predict the future. And second, that there are endless, multiple possibilities and permutations about how the Jewish future will work. And the reason that I bring up this idea that we work in two different ways is because of what happens this morning in the Parsha. Abraham buys Me'arat HaMachpelah. That's the Hebrew name for the cave of Machpelah, which is the place where he will bury Sarah. It is, by the way, the first time that someone weeps for someone who dies in the Bible, when he weeps for Sarah. And Machpelah has in it, the rabbis tell us, the Hebrew word kaful, which means double. What's double about Machpelah? First of all, remember that couples will be buried there. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. So first of all, it's a couple burial place. But also, according to our rabbis, this place that is a place of death is also the portal to the Garden of Eden, to eternal life. So it's double. It's an end and a beginning. And I think if we're talking about the Jewish future, we couldn't do better than start with the very first place that the Jewish people owned in the land of Israel. It is ironic that the first place we own is a burial place. But it's also significant in a different way, because the place where you wish to be buried, that's your home. And even if you didn't live there, for example, people who wish to be buried in Israel, it's because it's your home in the country of your imagination and your home that you wish for eternity. And so Abraham is making a very powerful faith statement here by saying, I want to purchase a place in the land of Israel, and that's where I will be buried, and that's where I will always be. And if you remember, in the Torah, Ephron says to him, no, I'll just give it to you. And Abraham says, no, I want to buy it. Then, by the way, Ephron gives him the price. He says, like, why buy it? What's a piece of land worth 400 shekels between us, you know? But why does Abraham want to buy it? First of all, I think because he feels he owes that to Sarah. That it should be something that actually costs him something, the place where he lays the woman who was his lifelong companion. But also, I think he feels like he wants to lay a real stake down in this place. Now, imagine if you could go back to the time of Abraham and say to him, by the way, in 3,500 years, people will be reading about your negotiation with Ephron. It's mind-boggling when you think about it. But that's also part of this statement of faith in the Jewish future. Because he doesn't only buy a burial cave for himself, he buys it for the generations to come after him. And remember that the Jewish future was holding on by a very thin thread. It was only Isaac, and then it was only Jacob before it became the 12 tribes. So Abraham is making a very powerful faith statement by buying this cave. And what it reminds me of in a strange way is the story of Saul Bellow that he tells in his book To Jerusalem and Back. Saul Bellow was an American novelist. He was a great novelist. He won the Nobel Prize, and he was Jewish. And when he won the Nobel Prize, afterwards, he took a trip to Israel, and there he met the only Hebrew novelist who had won the Nobel Prize, Shai Agnon. And they had a conversation, these two great writers. And Agnon said to him, "Tell me, are you translated into Hebrew?" And Bellow said, "Yes, my books have been translated into Hebrew." And Agnon said, "Oh, thank God, now you're safe." Think about that, right? Because English, who knows how long English is going to last? But Agnon was convinced if you're in Hebrew, people will always be able to read you, because in 1,000 years there might not be an English, just like there isn't an Assyrian, even though they were the greatest empire in the world, and there isn't a Babylonian, Aramaic, even though they were the greatest empire in the world, and nobody speaks Latin, even though Rome was the greatest empire in the world. But guess what? People still speak Hebrew. And so what Agnon was saying to Bellow is what Abraham was saying to the world. It seems improbable, and the future is thin, but it's also certain. It will be there. And so I want to be buried here. One of the things about knowing that the future is uncertain is that it can induce one of two possible attitudes. One is, since it's uncertain, there's nothing I can do, so I may as well not bother with it. The other is, since it is uncertain, I should do everything I can to help shape it. Because being uncertain is not the same as being uninfluenceable. And as we know, Jews throughout history have influenced the Jewish future and the general future in ways they could not imagine. And so what is it to want the Jewish future? It is to do what you're doing, to be part of a community, to be part of learning, to be part of practice, all those things. But most of all, it is to make a faith statement about the continuity and the resilience of the Jewish people. One of the things that you hear now all the time is how imperiled we are and how there's a renewal of anti-Semitism and how terrible it is. And I'm not saying that any of that isn't true. But we should also remember we have been through far worse. We have survived thousands of years of being really marginal to society and to the world and without a land and wandering and really at the whim of whatever ruler happened to arise at the time. Yet we are still here. Yet even today, if you go to the land of Israel, you can visit Ma'arat HaMachpelah from 3,500 years ago and see where Abraham put down the first stake in the promise of the Jewish future, that we would live and die and pay homage to the land of Israel. And here we are, thousands of years later, still doing the same thing. So really, the coda to the class the other night is, I still don't know what the Jewish future will be. All I know is that there will be a Jewish future. And that has been true for thousands of years. Even in the book of Job, Job, who suffered according to our tradition as much as anybody ever suffered, he says to God, even if you kill me, I will still believe in you. In other words, it's really hard to kill the faith of the Jewish people. In fact, it's impossible. So ultimately, what I want to say to you, whatever part of the Jewish world you love and live, you're contributing to the Jewish future. And in generations to come, they will remember you as we do our ancestors. Resilient, unconquerable, and faithful. That's been the Jewish past, and I have no doubt it will be the Jewish future. Shabbat Shalom.